because so that sin could be exposed, right? So the law exposed sin and grace covered it, right? So now that grace is here, we have a covenant of grace. That's truth. Our sin can be forgiven, we can be changed, we can be transformed. But now man is rejecting the truth of the grace that is available to them. And just like the sinner's locked up under the law, the sinner is again now rejecting grace. God's saying, if you're going to reject it, I'm going to seal the deal. Tell somebody you're getting in deep water now. How come Pharaoh wouldn't let the children of Israel go? Because God hardened his heart. Why? So that his salvation of his people could be even greater. Pharaoh, you son of the devil, you're not going to turn him loose. I'm just going to harden your heart and make you a fool in front of your whole nation. And then I'm going to deliver all my people out from under your rule. Get ready. So part of what's happening is that, and you have to go back to last year's series on the 4 horsemen. The white horse of deception is riding. And that white horse, I'm convinced now, is another Jesus. Because even in the book of Revelation, it's hard to look at that first horseman because he's on a white horse and everything looks like that ought to be Jesus and things coming. It's not. It's a counterfeit. And what's happened to America? There's 2 delusions that's happened. There's a delusion that says God's not going to do anything. We got to get rid of the idea of God. We got to throw God away. And we're going to act foolish in His sight. And God says, all right, if you're making that choice, I'm going to go ahead and give you over and make you believe all that stuff. So that when I judge, I will be shown even more holy. Thank you. I lost my thought. Second deception, Antichrist deception. Oh, the first, thank you. The first deception's in the world, which is being hardened. The second deception's in the church, which may be the most dangerous. When 77%, I think the statistics I saw went from between 70 and 77% of all people in the United States of America declare themselves to be Christian. Houston, we got a problem. And there is a delusion, a spirit of deception has come into the church. And there is another Jesus that is now being preached, and we don't even know Jesus well enough to know that another Jesus is being preached. That's the problem. That's what I've come to the realization of. We're far more concerned about prosperity than sacrifice and service. Too many of the people who call themselves Christians actually have another Jesus idolized in their mind and not the Jesus of the Bible. In other words, they've made a Jesus who they want Jesus to be. And they pull the scriptures out that they like about Jesus at the expense of everything else that Jesus said. And I hope not. But I got a feeling after next Sunday's message, I'm going to lose some friends in my own camp. Because what I'm going to show you is going to mess with you so bad you're even going to have to decide whether you know Jesus or not. How do we deal with this? Well, we got to understand. We cannot forget this, that the Antichrist spirit has been active in the world since the beginning. It's been here since the beginning. Even in the early church, 1 John 2:18, John wrote this, "Children, it's the last hour, and just as you have heard that Antichrist is coming, even now many Antichrists have appeared. From this we know that it is the last hour." Now, if they were having trouble with the Antichrist spirit in the early church, folks, he's not far from coming. He's not far from coming. But we need to understand this isn't new. I said that to say this. The church has survived for 2,000 years with the Antichrist spirit being against us. And the church is still here. And just because there is a spirit of deception and delusion being released in the world in which we live today, people can still be saved because you and I were once influenced by the same spirit. Look at what Paul said in Ephesians 2:2. "In which you formerly walked according to the course of this world, according to the ruler of the authority of the air, the spirit now working in the sons of disobedience." In other words, you and I used to be just like them. Now, I realize a lot of folks were probably brought up in the church and you got saved at an early age. I understand that. But you still have to understand the concept of what's happening here. We were still just as lost in our sin as anybody out in the world today. We were just as messed up. And our own lives were just as messed up. We had all the wrong kinds of thinking, just like the world does today, but that's who we were formerly. Now, if we have become something else, then those in the world can still become someone else as well. And if the Lord can save us, then He can save them. And if... I got to quit. This needs to be your cry and mine this weekend. Remove from me the deceptive way and graciously give me your law. Psalm 119:29. Remove from me the deceptive way and graciously give me your law. You see, we need to ask the Lord to show us any areas in our lives that we're deceived. Because it's sneaky. Deception's sneaky. The whole idea of deception is this, is that we believe a lie because we believe the lie is the truth. And we need to ask the Lord, are there any areas in my own life where I am deceived in some way? And if you dare, ask Him to shine the light on it. Because once He shines the light on it, you become accountable for it. Not that you weren't before. It's just that before you were happy on your way to judgment. If you ask Him to show you, He will, and then you have to decide whether you're going to come on into the light, turn loose of that deception, or whether you're going to pull back in it and just stay there. Only trouble is this, is from that day forward, you're going to be without excuse. Let's end on a good note. How's that sound? Daniel talked about our day. Imagine that. 2,500 years ago, God was speaking to our day. 3,000 years ago, God was speaking to our day. Daniel, a man living and having to serve a heathen king. I kept looking, Daniel 7:13 says, I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, one like a son of man was coming. And he came up to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom, that all the peoples, nations, and men of every language might serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which will not pass away, and His kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. Tell your neighbor, God still got this. God still got this. You see, I have to point out how dark some things are so that we can understand how bad it is around us, so that we can understand how much greater God's going to be on our behalf. And last week we looked at Psalms 2. Why do the nations rage? God just laughs. All this is working. All this is working according to God's predestined plan. I don't care what prophecy somebody says or gives. I don't care what somebody else declares that's different from what the Word of God has already said. You can take this to the bank. When God has predetermined something, there is not a devil in hell. There is not a demon lurking around you. There is not a Wall Street. There is not a government system. There is not a bank failure. That nothing is going to alter what God says is going to happen. Because if nothing else, if God can't find another man, He's God all by Himself. And He will have His way. And I have read the end of the book, and you need to do it again yourself. I have read the prophecies before the end of the book was written. And all the prophecies I find, God wins in the end. Charlie, I haven't found one place in the Word of God where God ever loses. I've not found one place in the Word of God where God is ever shaking because of what's happening upon the earth. What I find instead is that it's God that's up there that's shaking the earth. There's nothing we're doing on the earth that's shaking God. And what God has declared, that there is a kingdom that is coming, and it is going to exist upon this earth, and Jesus is going to reign for at least 1,000 years in that state before the thing's recreated and we get to live forever in the light of His presence. When the Word of God says that's the way it's all going to come out, my friends, you can take it to the bank that is the way it's going to come out. You just want to make sure you are standing on the right side when it all comes up, because He is about to separate the sheep from the goats. And it's beginning to happen now in the church. Stay tuned to next Sunday.